Hi everyone. It is lovely to be back in Berlin. I really love it here. So Martin has introduced me. I will explain a bit, kind of halfway through my presentation, what head of profession means, what I mean by profession. It's part of the story. But my name is Kane, and this is a shortened version of a talk that I gave last week at UX Scotland in Edinburgh. So if you want to see the full version, it's on my Twitter, at @Kane_KK. So this is the compressed version, because I don't have that much time. But as Martin said, this is a passion of mine. When I used to work with Martin, we were in a team that was leading communities of practice across UK government for many years. It's the best team that I worked on, the best thing that I've done in my career so far. So I can talk about communities of practice all day. If you want to talk to me about them after this, please come find me. So I will first just discuss what a community of practice is. So it's a group of people who come together, who share a concern or a passion for something that they do, and they learn how to do it better by interacting regularly. So to put it more simply, it's people that share a domain. So like this meetup, kind of public service transformation, public service design, a practice, so it could be design, user experience, UX, and people, so all of the people that make up that community. And a colleague that I used to work with, Laura Billing, she used to talk about a community of practice as a living curriculum, and I think that's a really beautiful way to think about it, because it is all about learning and sharing with the people that you're working with or working around, learning from people, but learning with them as well. And developing your skills to kind of continuing a practice and furthering a practice. This was coined by these people that I quoted, Etienne and Beverly Wenger Trainer. And they coined this term while studying apprenticeships. So it's that's a really useful model to think about when you're thinking about communities of practice. But for me, they're not solely about learning. They're about a lot more than that. For me, they are really about enabling consistency, collaboration, and efficiency, especially in an organization. So they're about supporting. So a community is such a supportive thing to have in your work. It's about, as I said, maintaining and growing a practice like design, growing a profession, attracting and retaining talent is always the thing that senior people like to hear about communities of practice. And they're really about connecting up people in an organization or in a field, in a domain, about really building relationships across the work, which I think is especially important in this type of work when we're trying to do hard, complex change. You need to build those relationships. And a senior leader once said this at an all hands. They said, communities are the glue, and we said, yes, they are. So Martin made a sticker because once someone senior says something, we're like, we're gonna remember that you said that because we believe it to be true, and we're so glad that you have now said it. So they really are the thing that holds a lot of pieces together. They provide that support. They help cross-team organizational working, and I think they really provide stability in an organization as well. So before I go further, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the Government Digital Service, because I'm going to use some examples about GDS. So as Martin said, Paloma and I both work at GDS, and GDS is all about helping the rest of government work better, work for everyone, work for the users, who are the people that use our services, as well as civil servants. So this is us. This is us before COVID. This picture makes me really nervous now, how close people are together. There's roughly 700 of us. We're based in London, Bristol, and Manchester, and we are a mix of designers, developers, user researchers, technical architects, product managers, and more. GDS itself is an agency of the Cabinet Office, or part of the central government, and it's the department that supports the Prime Minister and ensures the effective running of government. And everything that we do starts with users. So the sticker says users first. It's one of our things that we're always saying, and we live by it. As Paloma said, we start with users, we start with user research, and we everything that we do is about helping to solve problems and designing services around user needs. And our mission is to build a simple and joined up, personalized experience of government for everyone. This is our most recent kind of strategy that we're talking about. And this is one of the first things that we created. So you might know, if you've heard of GDS before, some people call it the gov.uk team. So that's just part of what we do, but it's one of the first things that we did. So it's the single domain for all of UK government information and services. This launched over 10 years ago now. And then we moved on to looking at the core challenges that government was facing repeatedly. So things like updating people on the status of their application, taking and making payments, proving someone's identity. So we built components, which are up on the screen. So things like gov.uk pay, gov.uk one login, building these components that solve problems once, and then making them so that they're shared. And some of these have been forked around the world. So Notify, I think someone earlier said 4 countries are using that. The gov.uk design system has been forked by a couple countries as well. So that's all about like how we want to work. We want to work in the open, make things open source, and make things that are easy to use and avoiding duplication. So I think that shows we're not just sorting out the websites that you're interacting with. We're looking at the whole way that a service is delivered, from the policy behind it to the technology that it's built on to the operational people delivering it. It's truly end-to-end, front-to-back, and cross-channel service design. And it's really large-scale, complex work. There's thousands of public services in the UK, and gov.uk has, as of April, they had 3.3 million average visits a day. So it's large, it's complex, and it's really important because the things that we do are for everyone. So this is for everyone is one of our design principles, and the things that we work on are often things that people have no choice but to use. So it's our responsibility to make them work for everyone. So quite simply, it's about making things simpler, clearer, and faster, and doing the hard work to make services simpler. And I really think it's one of the most, I'm sure many of you in this room agree, at a public sector meetup, I think it's one of the most impactful ways that you can be a designer, because bad service design is a huge unnecessary cost for taxpayers. So back to communities of practice. I think communities of practice are really core to user-centered service design, especially in UK government. How do we get this huge machine of government to work together and have a cohesive user experience so that people find it just as easy to get a passport as they do to do their taxes? So in the UK government, I kind of think of it as this ecosystem. So it's not just government, it's the wider public sector. We have cross-gov communities. It's, as I mentioned before, some of the work that I used to do with Martin, people working in user-centered design, so accessibility, content design, user research. We estimate there's about 4,000 people. There's probably more. That might be a low estimate of people, civil servants in the UK working across many, many departments, agencies, and arm's length bodies across the UK. So there's this kind of government piece of all of those people, but then we also have kind of similar related public sector parts like the NHS, the National Health Service, Parliament, as well as charities, and all of the in local government, all of the things that make up service delivery. And it's really important that we're connected as a community and learning from each other and sharing and talking. So a lot of my work has focused on the user-centered design specific part of this very, very wide group of people. So there's about 500,000 civil servants in the UK. If we look at people that are working in the digital data and technology profession, it's actually 24,000 or 28,000. It goes up every time I get the number, every couple of months. It keeps growing, which is really great. So again, that's across all of UK government. Out of those kind of 500,000, 28,000 are working in digital. And then GDS is about 700 to 800 people. And within GDS, we have about 45 designers. So communities have been really important, especially in the early years of GDS and in the early years of digital transformation in government. So on this slide is kind of like the very most beginning stage of our design system. So this is HackPad, which then became Dropbox Paper, and I don't think any of those exist anymore. But we were using this for sharing patterns and components before the design system was created. Alongside this, we had, and we still have, it's just not really active, a mailing list for any of those kind of user-centered design practitioners to kind of share and ask questions. So in the early days, that was super active, people asking questions, people wanting to figure out what other people are working on and to collaborate. So these things have been replaced by things like Slack. All of people working in digital in UK government can join a Slack, and it's amazing. You have so much access to people and so much knowledge. We have the gov.uk design system, and we have things like the service manual, which are kind of like self-serve things where you can get the information that you might have been asking for 5 to 10 years ago. But we still use these existing channels to discuss and ask questions of each other. And so there's some building blocks. We always talk about building blocks of communities of practice and user-centered design in government and community gatherings. So things like this are what we did really early on and continue to do for a very long time in the UK government. So just bringing people together face-to-face from different departments, usually around like themes around our disciplines, so designers coming together, user researchers coming together, people coming together to talk about accessibility, sharing case studies, and then just having lots of time to meet people from other departments in person. And they were just such a great thing that got people excited about work, and it helped them in their work. And they weren't just in London, they were all around the country. And I think there's a couple other things that help kind of like tie us together through the work that we are doing. So one of them is the service standard, which is ensuring the quality of government services, a binding service standard that teams are working towards with 14 points. And then the service manual, which is kind of like the guidebook for how to meet that service standard and meet those points. And again, it's continually iterating and drawing in people's work from across government, drawing in blog posts related to certain points so that we're all helping each other figure out how to do this. I mentioned GitHub. All of our code is on GitHub. Everything's open sourced. Our design principles are another thing that bring us together. They're kind of the shared values that align us in our work. So if you're a user-centered designer in government, you know these things. You might say these things to your team in a meeting to kind of get people aligned and get people to remember to kind of start with user needs. We have a lot of case studies. So again, people talking at meetups, people talking now in remote ways to share work. We are up to 70 now internal case studies that are kind of private and only for civil servants to access, but just having this bank of things that you can kind of go to and look for an example has been so helpful. And as well as blog posts, which are open to the public, where we kind of practice our working in the open mantra and putting that into practice. And talking about all of our work and all the things that we're doing and trying. And the design system. So the design system is containing the styles, components, and design patterns that teams need to make services that look and behave like gov.uk. Everything in it is based on user research. And I think it's really a snapshot of the community coming together and the way that the design system has been designed. I don't think it would look the way that it does if there hadn't been this community already coming together. It really shaped the way that the design system is now and the way that people use it and interact with it and contribute to it. So this is a quote from someone who used to work on the design system team, Amy Hoop. She says, "You'll only end up with a design system that works for the whole community if the whole community helps to build it." And that really runs through all of the design system team's work. So there's a really considered contribution process. They've recently iterated it and blogged about it. This is a screenshot of a YouTube video that they've just uploaded with the blog post. They're really looking at how can we involve the community earlier on so that the things that we're working on and prioritizing are what people need now and then we can also get the right people involved to really make that work impactful and benefit the wider community. And there's so many different ways that the design system team does this. So they have a working group, which is a smaller group of the community that are looking at proposals coming in. They're looking at the backlog. They're making recommendations. They're kind of talking to contributors, and they're really making sure that the things that are going into the design system are the right level, the right quality, and the right benefit for this wide group. And then there's things like Design System Day, so an event that they run every year. They do workshops with the community. There's a call every single Friday at 2 p.m. that people can join. And then they've been doing co-design, which I am really fascinated about, this work that they're doing where they are taking something from the backlog. So this example that someone tweeted about is a task list pattern or component. And they are, bringing together over 30 people to build a component together, to test it or prototype it, develop it further. And I think this is really like the pinnacle for me of what really good community work looks like and how it can help you deliver really good products and services. And all of this, I think this way of working is down to having a community manager on the team. So I think this is like a huge win for communities of practice, that the design system team has a community manager, Imran Hussein, who is leading all of this type of work and doing a really great job of it. So I mentioned that I would talk about professions. So sometimes you have to change the name of what you're doing in order to get buy-in to keep doing it. So some of the work that I used to do around cross-scope user-centered design communities was shut down. And now it's come back as professions. And I think it's very similar to what I used to do as a kind of community manager, and I'll describe why. So we now use this term for the work that I do for our internal community of practice, so those 45 designers at GDS. And we have professions for each of our disciplines. So there's a profession of technologists, a profession of researchers, et cetera. So it's a group of people who do similar kinds of work. And we talk about it as community. That's still very much part of it, but it's about the community and the practice. So the practice, or I think professions bit, is the standards, the direction of the practice, the career progression, the capability and capacity building, the more, kind of explicit knowledge, like what are the things that designers need to know and what do we need to be working on together, as well as things like performance management. So it's a real mix of these things, but for me, the most important part of my job and the thing that I think is still core to everything else is community. And this is a quote from an ex-head of design at GDS, who always talks about how you come because of the work and you stay because of the people. And I think this really runs true at GDS in the design community. Broadly, just to give you a kind of look into the kind of a snapshot of what I'm now working across within GDS. So we have 3 kind of pillars of work. We have gov.uk, which I've described. We have digital service platforms, which are like those components, like the design system, like Notify that I also described. And then we have another bit, which is called digital identity. And our professions sit across all of those. So there's designers on multidisciplinary teams across all of these pillars. And then my job is to kind of bring together the community across all of these teams so that we're working across the organization and not just being siloed in our teams or in our pillars. So people have told me at GDS that they have joined GDS because of the design community, that they've stayed because of the design community. And I think that's like a really special thing to have at work. I've never had that anywhere else. It doesn't mean that we don't have more work to do. There's still a lot that we can do to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. But I think the work that we do and the importance that we give to community really helps us be joined up, helps us have consistent ways of working, helps us share what we're doing so that we're not duplicating things across the organization, support each other through really hard things like COVID, like org organizational change that happens constantly through ministers asking us to do hard things. It really is this kind of support network where we can all kind of take on challenges together. And it also helps with progression. People like to talk about maturity models. This is a maturity model for communities of practice. This is from Emily Weber, who has really, really good writing on communities of practice, and I recommend you look at her work if you're interested. But I think this kind of green maturing area is, I think, where you're always at. It's really hard to go past that into this kind of self-sustaining. I think in an organization where there is a lot of change, there's a lot of people coming and going because communities are fluid. You're always changing people, but there's also change in priorities, change in focus of your work. I think that means that you always have to be putting in a lot of effort into the community of practice, leading it and making sure that everyone is happy and able to do what they need to do. And something that I talk about a lot as well is that communities of practice are not self-organizing. I get really frustrated when people say they're self-organizing because there's always someone doing that work. If you think it's self-organized, it's probably someone who isn't a man doing that work. It's probably someone that you're not, it's just like a lot of this invisible work, and I think it's really unfair to not acknowledge it. So it doesn't happen. It's not self-organized. There's people doing the work. But there's also no self-sustaining of a community without leadership and visibility and support. So a couple lessons that I've learned that I want to share with you through my work. I think I've made this clear, but it's a job. So you need to have either someone in leadership or someone in a community manager role who is their job is the community of practice. Because as I said, if you don't have someone, if it's happening, and it's not a job, then it's unacknowledged, unpaid work. Building relationships is a really key part. I used to tell people that when I was a community manager, I used to say my job is helping people meet each other. People would email me and ask a question about, design at X department, and I would say, here's the head of design, go talk to them, or here's a colleague that you should know. And so much of it is just helping people know like what networks they should be in, what people they should be meeting, and really looking sideways, which is another kind of GDS sticker that we really like. Just do it. I think it can be really daunting to do this type of work, to kind of get people together. But you really have to think of it as a design problem and kind of experiment and start small and iterate and see what works. Again, every community is different. Every community is changing and fluid, so you really have to just try things, and you're going to have to change things. Once you figure out what works, you might still have to shift it and change. And intentional gathering is my last lesson. That meeting face-to-face in spaces like this are so helpful for then creating a much easier remote online interaction. Once you've met people face-to-face, it's so much easier to ask someone a question on Slack. You don't feel like you're being burdensome because you've started to build that relationship. And I think we can overlook how much impact meeting face-to-face can have when it's safe for people to do so. So to wrap up, I'm going to plug a book that I'm co-writing with Martin. It's called Strong Design, and it's about more than what I've talked about, but a lot of the community stuff will be included in that, and it's about design and culture, capability, and community. You can find out more on strongdesignbook.com. I have links, but this is not very helpful right now, but as I said, this is on Twitter if you want to see the whole deck and the whole story. Thank you.